Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for thank you for taking the time to join us today on today's webinar. My name is Stephanie, and I manage sales and the admin side, as well as customer service and marketing. So it's a pleasure to coordinate this session with you all. Today, we're excited to be co-hosting this webinar with one of our ISVs, Risoft, along with two of my colleagues from their team. We have Sue who's the HR manager, and Garrett, who's the sales and implementation specialist. They'll be walking you through the mobile warehouse solution for Cispro software, and we'll be happy to answer any questions along the way. Just a quick reminder that this session is being recorded, and I'd be happy to send a copy to anyone who would like one. Once again, thank you for being here, and with that, I will pass it over to Garrett.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. And again, appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to attend today's webinar. Today, we'll be covering the Warehouse Evaluation Blueprint, questions for success within your organization. So it's just a brief introduction of myself. I am a sales and implementation specialist here with Risoft. We've been a longtime Cispro ISV partner with Cispro. We are one of the very few that are a global ISV partner. And within that, we've been partnering with Lonehill for a very long time, with the majority of our customers that are using Lonehill today as their consulting group. Now, one of the things that we focus on is building those simple plug-and-play solutions for your organization. Now, the ultimate goal of a plug-and-play solution is for quick implementation so that you're up and using the solution to provide that business value that you are expecting out of it. And then to build standard process within your organization, helping you ultimately then scale to take your business to the next level with the resources that you do have. Now, going through some of the agenda for today, we're going to be evaluating, or why you should be evaluating your warehouse. What is really behind that? What's the objectives to evaluating your warehouse? And what are some of the outcomes that you might experience from that? Then we'll be going through some of those key questions that you can ask your team in a variety of different areas, from employees to what your current system is, and to just what your general warehouse layout is like, bringing that to some of the tips for success, and how, after you've gone through your evaluation, what can you be looking to do for that next step within this process? We will be going through a live demo today as well to show you what it looks like after we've done and asked these questions and evaluating what our environment looks like. And then how do we go through the process to implement a specific workflow within this solution to give you the intended benefits of a streamlined inventory, real-time data, and ultimate accuracy within your environment. Once that's complete, we'll be opening it up for Q&A, so feel free to put any questions that you might have throughout today's webinar into the Q&A section within Teams, and we'll be able to answer that at the end of today's session. So why should we evaluate our warehouse? And that's one of the big questions that anybody might have in today's environment. As business is continuing to grow and things are becoming more and more important, with some of the big industry challenges that we're all facing today, is some of those rising costs, the labor that we're dealing with, the lack of employees that are coming in. All these things are challenges that a business might experience. So we're trying to gain more efficiencies within that organization, so that way we can be more successful within our business operations. So a few things that you're going to want to be looking to evaluate is, do we have any inefficiencies or bottlenecks within our process flows that are happening out there on the floor, both from a systematic perspective and from a physical perspective? Well, then we manage or look for our manual processes and general inventory errors. So if we have those manual processes, how do we streamline those manual processes? One of the big things that I hear very often with anybody that's using Cispro today, or using it from a long-standing period of time, is they might have a physical inventory that's there, and it's not always reflected within your environment. So how do you control that and put systems in place to help mitigate those issues? And then also just preparing for that growth and being able to scale your organization, having those standard operating procedures in place will help you grow your business and making sure we maintain that standard. And then just general lack of visibility. If you're an inventory control, warehouse manager, CFO, anybody that's dealing with the valuation of inventory, how much of it do we have on hand? Having that visibility into what's actually happening out there on the floor is key. So those are some of the reasons why you want to evaluate your warehouse. Take the time to do that exercise to understand holistically what's happening. Now, moving over to some of the questions that you might ask, and really starting with just the general structure of our warehouse. Now, there's a few questions in this list, so feel free, take a picture of each of these slides to just give you some context of what questions can I ask of my employees as I'm going through this process. So a couple key questions that I like to ask anybody is going to be, does your physical warehouse match what's happening within your digital system? Now, this very much comes into play when I have a lot of pallet racking or locations and warehouses throughout my facility. Does that match what I see systematically? Because what we want to know is physically my inventory is in this warehouse, but systematically it's saying within this warehouse. So do those two things align? And asking that question helps you overall generally look at what is the layout of my warehouse? How can I be more efficient with that? And that leads us to the next one. Are your bins and stock items labeled? So when I am looking at my physical inventory and the general racking positions that exist, how do I identify those locations? How do I know what's in that location for the product that's within there? So do those bins and stock items, are they labeled with barcodes? And if not, what's that step that we need to do? And then when we're talking flow of inventory, are items that are frequently picked, stored in accessible locations, right? If we have high volumes of inventory that are constantly moving, how do I make a flow within my organization or within that warehouse so that way it's easy for my employees to find that inventory and transact against it in the future? Now, a few of those other questions that you can look at is just, what does that look like? Where are the bottlenecks that I have? Do I have license plates? What does the general product look like in itself? Is it on pallets? Is it in cases? Is it boxes? Is it singular items? Those are all things to start asking yourself to say, what does this environment look like? And how can I start to structure this so it is the most efficient method possible? And once you've gone through some of the warehouse general questions, that's when you can start to flow in. How do I start to automate this? What technology do I currently have within my environment that could either help me do this today, or do I need to source a solution that's going to help me automate those workflows out there in that physical environment? So some of the key questions that I like to ask here is going to be, is my inventory real time? Do I have a lot of paper that's out there on the floor today that is saying, no, this is not real time? What current solutions do I have within my portfolio that actually integrate to my ERP system to help me do this? Is it a WMS system? Is it a shipping solution that's going to integrate and feed that data back into my environment so I can see it within real time? Do I have some of those barcodes? Am I automating my label printing process if I do have to label things internally? Do I have to go and sit at a computer to do that and type that out into a Word or Excel document and then print the label, or is it already automated? Some of these things are really the key questions to start asking when we look at what technology can start to fit into these environments. Now, of course, again, there's some other ones of, can we support high volumes? Are my operators equipped with the technology like a handheld device to be able to do this today? Is my wireless infrastructure capable of handling a system out there on the floor? Those are some of those key things that you should be asking structurally of, can we support a solution like this? Or what steps do we need to do to support a solution like that? Now, some of this comes to some of those roadblock questions that we might have. What's stopping us from doing this today? It comes always back to that real-time inventory or that lack of visibility. Are we trying to get to that point as an organization to make those changes? I would see that's a goal for every organization, to be able to have that real-time view into what is actually happening out there on the floor using those systems. And then one of the things that you can go and ask, and your team members that are out there on the floor are some of the best people to go and have this conversation. What challenges are they experiencing in their day-to-day life when they are going through some of the key processes of receiving, of production, of issuing material, receiving finished good product into inventory, or just general picking of a sales order? What are they doing in their day-to-day life helps me as a planner within my organization to understand what is ultimately happening and what are the gaps that we can fill to make their life much more efficient as they go through this process. Now, again, it comes back to that employee. The employee is one of the key drivers to a solution like this ultimately being successful. So again, it comes to that conversation that you're having with them to understand how can we track what they are doing so that way we can provide metrics based off of their efficiencies or their productivity. How do I know what they're doing is ultimately correct as an employee? Is they constantly working on time consuming tasks? How much entry are they doing? How much paper are they handling in a given scenario? These things are very key to understanding what is happening out there on the floor. And that's why you might be seeing some of those lags from an inventory perspective within your ERP compared to what's actually out there on the floor. And ultimately, at the end of the day, with employees being harder and harder to come by as that labor shortage is out there in the market, we want to make their life coming into work that much easier, more productive for you as the employer. So some of the key things and tips that we could be looking at to start driving some of this automation within your environment is really going to be looking at how do we start managing order process. And one thing that you want to do as an organization through this whole journey is to sit down, take all of the information that you gathered as you ask these questions of the employees that are out there on the floor and identify those key gaps that are within your environment and bring that back to let's start building a general scope. Where do we see the most return on our investment within this? So many organizations, and this will tie us to the demonstration today, the first place that they start is in their receiving area. So how do I automate receiving to help me flow my inventory from start to finish to get the users comfortable within the system, start seeing that return of what real-time inventory looks like? Then it takes you down to the next natural paths of once inventory is good at receiving, then we can start looking at how do we automate the flow of production. Is it issuing material up front as we do it? Is it going to be receiving the finished good product as soon as that finished product is complete? And then moving you over to the sales order side of now that finished goods are complete, what do we do to make that order picking process as seamless as possible for us internally and also getting that inventory out for the customer in that timely manner? So order picking management is a big one to start to think about how do we pick our orders? When we look at what physical product exists within the environment, does that exist on the pallets? And we move pallets consistently through our environment? Does pallet tracking or license plating help us move that product holistically from one location to the next? Then building all the information that you're collecting as part of these transactions with a system allows you to start creating some of those KPIs. Now that you're understanding what's out there, we bring it in systematically, allows us to report against it and put those metrics in place. So that way we know if we're above the metric, great. If we're below the metric, starts allowing you to ask the why questions again. What more can we do to streamline this workflow? Then it even comes into labor, right? Employees are providing work out there on the floor. They're doing something in production or in just their general areas of receiving and order picking. How do I track that they are becoming more efficient with the system instead of the manual processes that they might have had in the past? And then bringing all of these features into a mobile application for them to use out there on the floor to reduce that amount of them having to come back to an office, coming back to you to ask a question in this environment to say, hey, where is this inventory? Now they'll have the power on a mobile device to be able to ultimately see that information and start to become more self-sufficient employees, empower them to be out there on the floor and really take responsibility for what they're their actions are within that organization. Now you might see a QR code here on the right-hand side of the screen. If you want to, you can just go through, take your phone, scan that QR code. That'll bring you to a document that you could download to be able to get a list of some of these questions that we've covered today in a document form that you can use to check off, like we're good here, we're good here, we're good here, and ask the questions in that manner. So that's one highly suggested thing for you to go through and do, and generate that list on your own and see what do we need to accomplish within our environment. And don't select the link. That's probably step number one. All right. So bringing this to our PO receiving story. So tying all these questions into what are we going to do within this one specific segment of our organization? So this is a customer that I worked with. They are a plumbing company, heating manufacturer. So they receive in products and they're ultimately trying to get them labeled and bring them in a timely manner. So when they came to us, they experienced some of these key challenges. They were currently manually receiving everything against pen and paper. So what that meant to them was I would receive in the truck, I would look through my document, whether if that was a packing slip, a bill of lading that described what was on this specific truck that was tied to that PO number. And they would go through with their pen and a clipboard and write down yes, or check the line to say, we do have this, or no, we don't have this. And then that paperwork would get set into a basket, and that basket would be collected at certain points of time throughout the day. And that could be dependent upon how much work that department actually had within there. So it could have been received in 1 hour after the product was physically received in, or it was even to the point where it was 1 to 2 days afterwards. We've received that product in physically, but that product is no longer reflected into our ERP, which is SysPro, for an extended period of time. And that creates challenges downstream of not knowing, well, how much can I sell at this point in time? How much could I use this for within production? So it created that massive data lag of where exactly is this inventory? And this customer was also going through the process of manually applying labels. They were sitting there and saying, I'm either going to hand write on this product with like a Sharpie to identify what the product ultimately is, which for an end user that's out there on the floor makes it hard for them to really see what that inventory is, especially if you're dealing with product that's going to be in a case within a pallet of multiple different other products. So it reduced some of their employee visibility into what they were actually seeing out there on the floor. So that lack of invisibility was across the board. It was from what they see within the warehouse and what they're seeing within SysPro itself from an office perspective. So one thing that they did is they looked at mobile warehouse to be able to automate their PO receiving and start generating labels at that time of receiving to apply it to the product. Now, they went through quite a few of those questions that we covered earlier here in today's session. Was what does my environment look like? They sat down with us. We took them through those questions of what does my PO look like? I need to provide one GRN number for all the items being received. Okay, how do we go about doing that? Does that help communicate that to the people that are within the office that are actually entering the PO? And then they identified, well, what happens if we over receive or under receive? Because it's not always one and the same, where a supplier might send more product than they actually were on the PO. So how do we accommodate for that? So those lists of questions will help identify what do we need to do within this environment to set up a solution like this. And this is ultimately going to lead us into the demonstration piece of today. So I'm going to flip over to my software here, and we're going to see SysPro Mobile Warehouse up on screen. This is our login screen. So a user is going to simply just have a username, password, and they select the company that they're going to sign into. And this gives them a lot of flexibility on how do I deploy it out there to the floor, right? What's going to be easiest for that out there to manage? Is it going to be on my laptop within a PO receiving station? Because that's a physical spot within the warehouse that never changes. Or if they're operating forklifts and pulling product out of the truck, is a handheld device going to be the better method for them to be using? So that way they do not have to constantly get off the forklift and go to that computer to enter this information. Those are things that you want to identify of what's going to work best for those end users that are actually accessing the system. And this is flexible for them to be on that laptop or that PC that's in that station or on that handheld device using the mobile app to make it easily accessible. So we're going to log in here. And this is going to just bring me to my home screen. So what we're going to do today is we're going to set up the scenario. I've created some demo data for a purchase order. Now, the environment that I wanted to create based off what that customer was experiencing is they have one GRN number per multiple lines that they're receiving in at that one time. So we have to set up for that. They also allow over receipting and under receipting. So we're going to go through some of the actual setup in the application to create their intended workflow. So as I logged in here, it brought me to my general home screen. One of the best things about standard plug and play solutions is it gives you access to the setup for your organization to make any changes on the fly. And that gives you that freedom and that flexibility to say, oh, we're making mistakes consistently. We're almost always over receiving. How do I go in and make a change now to reduce that issue within my organization? So what will happen is I'm going to go through and I'm going to adjust the role. You can set this application up to accommodate for multiple roles within your organization, right? You have different employees that are going to be within different jobs within that environment. Take receiving as a separate role. Production could be a separate role, and then ultimately your order fulfillment could be a separate role. Or what I've seen done in other organizations is structuring it so you have administrators, supervisors, and operators. So you can create that level of authority within the application on what can each role perform. So that way no one is creating a mistake or doing anything that's not within their right to do. So we're going to adjust my administrator's role as I'm an administrator within this application. We're going to go to my modules tab here, and we're going to go down to PO receiving as a whole. So we select our module that we're going to make our settings change for. Now, when I mentioned GRN, I want to be able to provide one GRN number. So I'm going to select my batch. Now, this environment that I'm working in is multiple bins. So I do have to apply the unique bin location within that environment where that inventory is going to exist. So you have a few options on what you can do with those bin locations. Does the user identify where they're putting the product? Or do we give them a defaulted area that they should put the product in, helping guide the users on where they can put that product? So I'm going to hit custom, and they're always going to put it into this staging bin location. So when we receive product in, we receive it into one staging location, which preps the product to be put away into its actual inventory where it should exist throughout the warehouse. That gives you control as a leadership team to understand, I have this product here within this location. This is my put away. This product should always be moved before the end of the day. Setting up those processes to streamline those inventory movements. And you can go through and do a few different defaults as well, defaulting your quantity. Don't always recommend that because we want to make sure they're as accurate as possible. We want them to apply the actual quantity that they're going to fill in. And then it comes to those permissions of what do you allow the user to do? And that could be as simple as, do you allow the additive unit of measure, right? Do you have multiple units of measure for your product that comes in? I very commonly see this in this environment of they have an each, then they have a case that has multiple eaches within it, or then they might have a pallet that has multiple cases on that pallet. So how do I want to receive that product in? And now we're coming down to where we're going to be over receipting. These over receipting and under receipting gives you control on what the user can do. I like this because it sets it up for success, and especially when you're doing that operator, supervisor, admin level of permissions, because a general operator might not be able to over receipt, but that supervisor can. So that way it gives you a process to say, hey, I have this issue. Can you please verify this for me? Get a second pace of eyes on it, understand what is actually happening with this and what do we need to do in the subsequent steps. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set this to a warning. So that way it warns me that, hey, we are trying to over receipt. It's also that catch gate in case somebody as an employee accidentally enters the wrong quantity. And then we're going to do the same for under receiving as well. So making sure that they're meeting the correct quantity, they're properly going through and counting the inventory that they're receiving in. And those are some of the key settings that you might start with within your environment. And as you can see within this, there's more settings that you can set to create control within this process. So we're going to hit save. So my save is successful. And we're going to come right back to the modular side of the application to go through the process of actually submitting this PO. So the truck is coming in physically to our environment, and I'm going to select the module that I'm going to perform the transaction, which is PO receiving. So now once we're in PO receiving, I have a list of my POs. Now it comes back to what availability of barcodes do we have within our environment for us to scan. The goal is to get to as much scanning as physically possible. So that way, as you're scanning things, that reduces the amount of human entry. So we've worked with suppliers or vendors in the past to barcode the documentation. So that way, when I do receive that document in, I can simply scan the PO number that I want to receive in at that time. Now, if that does not apply necessarily to your organization, you can do other methods of entry of simply selecting out of the list or typing in that PO number that you're going to receive in, being able to accommodate for all the different workflows that you might experience within your organization. So we're simply going to select my PO number of 1129, and we're going to receive this product in. So now once we're ready to receive it in, we're seeing two line items that I want to go through and ultimately receive. All of this information is being pulled in real time from your SysPro environment, as mobile warehouse for SysPro is simply just that extension of your core side of your ERP to the floor on a much easier to use method. Less information for them to see on screen as that end user. So physically what's happening is the product is being pulled off of that truck. I'm pulling it off, whether if it's pallet jack, physically pulling the box, or a forklift's pulling it off, and we're staging it on the floor for us to go through a proper count of how much inventory we have. So we've identified the first line item that needs to be received in, and it's our stock code of A112. So I've gone through and I have counted that product, and we're going to select the line item that we need to receive in. And again, if your supplier sends you product that's already labeled, there's methods to be able to leverage those supplier labels to scan to bring in. And that's another question to ask. Does my vendor send me product labeled that I can leverage, or do I still have to internally print that label for me to be able to use it downstream in all of my subsequent processes? So it brings up my dialog for me to apply my quantity. It clearly displays my outstanding quantity that I am looking for, that we should be receiving in. So for the scenario, I might find 50 immediately, and there's still more product that's coming off the truck. And the product is going to exist within my warehouse N, my bin location that was defaulted here, which is bin N. So that's my staging location that I'm always bringing product into. And now it comes to the next field. This is where you can track your license plates. Again, this is very beneficial if you're moving high volumes of product from location to location, or your product that comes in off that truck is in a wrapped pallet form. So I can apply a license plate if that's applicable to my organization, and I can track the license plate movement throughout the environment. Now, again, being that this is such a real-time integration to the core side of your application, it's the same exact fields that you would be applying if you were performing this within the PO receipt module within SysPro core itself. So I can apply my note or reference. There's simply text fields that you can take and apply information into to give you more of an audit trail of what's happening within WMS versus the core side. And it helps communicate who did what out there on the floor, where purchasing then is reviewing the information that ultimately comes in. So now I'm going to hit save, and this should give me that warning message once I go to post this of we're under picking this order. So now I'm going to go through with A112. The remaining product has come off. You can actually see that the line is updated with a color cue. This color cue is here to help me as an employee be more efficient with understanding where am I at within this process. If I haven't started it, it's blank. If I'm halfway through, it's showing yellow. And if it's green, we're meeting our required quantity. And if it's red, we're over. Every employee works a little bit differently with what's going to help them be more effective with this solution. So personally, the color cues have helped this customer implement this so that way they know where they at within the process. There's a scenario where you're going to have more than 2 line items on a PO. You could have 1 line, you could have 100 lines on the PO. It helps them know where are they at for all of the different lines that they're working through off of this truck. So now we're going to go through and receive in again. Now I accidentally enter a quantity of 60 instead of 50, and I go through the same process. So when I hit save, here's an example of that warning message to help guide the user on they are making a mistake. So we do not allow over receiving in this environment. You are about to over receive this order. Are you sure you'd like to continue? For me, I'm going to hit no because I'm just the end employee, and I'm going to come back and adjust my quantity here within this field. And now I'm going to hit save, and we'll see that line item update. So it's showing that green meaning we're good. Now, one thing is an organization, you might experience more technical stock codes or stock codes that have more complexities with it. And in any environment, you might be a food and beverage manufacturer that requires lots, or you might be more in an environment that requires serial numbers because you're in automotive or in just pharmaceuticals or any of those different industries. So we're pulling that same data. So for the next line item is actually a lot traceable stock code. So I have to apply that information for what lot are we using going forward. So I apply my quantity that I'm receiving in. Again, the same information applies. And now again, I can choose to either use my vendor's lot number or I can create my own lot number that I'm going to use internally. And again, it's properly communicating what fields need to be entered to by the employee based off of the requirements of that item. So for today's example, we're just going to use our date as our lot number, 2/27/2025. And again, the same information, all standard. So I hit save. Both of my lines are showing green, and that's allowing us now to go through the process of posting. So I can hit post, and I will get a green success message here at the bottom. Every single time a user posts the transaction, they will get a message explaining if it was successful, and if it's not, the why it's successful in a red error message to help, again, guide them, provide them as employees visibility on the floor of what are they experiencing, and do I need to go and communicate this to another person within my organization to assist me with this. And now we can see our GRN has been generated. So 1055 is my GRN number, 1 GRN number per all lines being receipted at this time. And then accounting is going to take this and go to the next steps with that for proper invoicing and processing of that PO. Now here comes back to the physical side of it, where we've identified within our environment after we were handwriting information on the product itself or manually typing this into a Word doc to print out. This is where you can gain that efficiency of no longer having to sit down at a desk to print these labels or handwrite the label. I can use this system to generate the labels for me with help of additional solutions to print and automate that workflow. So it automatically prints the content or the labels to the label printer, and I apply it to the physical product in preparation for it to go to its new home within inventory. So some key content that any organization should look at for a label is how do I clearly identify the product? So without a system, how do I know what exactly this product is and where did this product come from? So being that I did 3 separate technical transactions against these 2 line items, I'm getting 3 different labels to print. So some of the key information that I put on just a generic label is going to be my PO number, so I understand what PO this was associated to. So if I have questions about this product and where it came from, I can communicate that effectively to other team members within the org. My stock code or my part number, that is your first key item to have on a label that should be barcoded, because that's the key identifier to the product, and that's what's going to help identify it downstream. And when I scan that, I no longer have to enter that information. And then it comes down to more ancillary items that might still be important, like the description of that product, the GRN number, the date that this was received in on. So you can start adding informational pieces to clearly identify that product. And taking it to that next step further, if you are lot traceable, that's the secondary thing that should be on a barcode. Or if you're serialized, that's the next thing that should be barcoded on that label, because that's the unique identifier to that product itself. So applying that information to your label as well is important, dependent upon your stock code. Now, this flow can be automated so they don't see this screen, but this gives them confirmation that this is the type of label that I'm using, and this is the warehouse that it's being put out to. There is options for you to have multiple different types of labels, because you might have different type of product that requires different information on it. So giving you more and more flexibility to apply what information is important to you with your inventory. So we print all and close. My print is successful. My PO lines have now be left to 0, and I can see that we are complete with this. I back out, and I could go through the next PO that I'm receiving in at that time, right? So giving me that visibility as to what ultimately happened. Now, that's taking that process that employees currently might do today within the office, brought it out there to the floor. And now, how do I know what the employee did out there on the floor is correct? And that brings us ultimately to a reporting standpoint. So that way you can see, here are some of reports that you can generate to monitor the what is happening out there on the floor, and start building those metrics, those KPIs that we discussed, to ultimately give you as leadership team the visibilities to the what that just happened. So I could simply come down to a PO receipted today, and I can run this report and see, here's the transactions that were performed against this one specific PO number systematically, instead of me having to be out there, hey, what did you do today? Giving you tools to be more effective with the information that is gathered out there on the floor. And some of the nice to have stuff that comes along with it is simply just being able to export that to an Excel document. Everybody works a little bit differently within the organization. So I want to be able to consume this data within Excel, do some conditional formatting against it, or share it to another team member that doesn't have access to this system. So tying it all together from start to finish of bringing it out. Product comes in, we've identified our workflow that we want to achieve based off of the current problems that we're having of not real-time data, setting up the workflow to say, this is how we're going to go through receiving, and now we're properly performing receipts, updating SysPro in real time, applying labels, and staging that product for it to ultimately be put away into inventory, and then reporting against that process. Now, as you can see, there's a whole lot more to this application than just receiving. There's transactions upon general inventory of transfers, queries, your stock takes for physical inventory, and even order picking, being able to fulfill your sales orders as they go out the door, and then also WIP as well, helping you in production follow that inventory all the way through from each unique phase within the organization. That brings us back to our home screen, where I can see my transactions that were performed from a support perspective, and giving me holistically all the information that I need to be successful within this. All right. And ultimately, that's going to open this up to Q&A. So if you have any questions at this time, feel free to either type it out into our Q&A section and type them out, give you a few minutes here, ask any questions, and we'll be able to provide you any answers to them.
hear it while people are thinking. One of the common questions that we often get is, how long does it typically take to implement PO receiving?
That is a great question, Sue. It's quite common to see PO receiving to be live within an environment anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks of implementing because you want to go through the proper installation and testing of those scenarios that you might experience as a business because you might not have just the same process every single time. There's sometimes outliers that you have to account for. So it's very common for someone to take that time to properly test the transaction, make sure that they validated all scenarios that they go through before they ultimately go live. One of the best things with this solution holistically is that you can do a phased implementation. So if you want to start with just PO receiving, you absolutely can get live on PO receiving, see the benefits of it being live within the environment, providing you that real-time inventory, and then you take that next step to implement the next phase of it, like going to put away process, going to our physical inventory counts, and so on.
Another question that we often get is, what area in my warehouse should we automate first?
That's a great one too. And it really depends on where you're feeling the most pain. You know, you do not have to start at PO receiving. It's one area that a lot of organizations do, but you might come and say, we're really struggling within our order fulfillment, right? Our order picking is very manual with a paper-based system of checking off what was picked or what needs to go on back order and then taking that document and submit it to the proper people within the customer service department to adjust the sales order and process it. Where then, if you implemented a solution like this, it allows you to go through, constantly validate that you're picking the correct product and move it through that flow in a much more efficient manner.
Okay, we have a question here, and this relates more to the hardware side of the world is, would you suggest a specific type of labeler for high volumes?
Yes, there is a variety of different label automation that you can look at, and it really comes down to the printer that you're looking for. There's a few different options that we can happily provide you for high volume label printing. The most common label printer that's being used in high volume environments is going to be a Zebra ZT411. That Zebra printer allows for a high volume of labels to be printed each and every single day and not burn out the print head on it, and gives you thousands upon thousands of labels that you can ultimately print without having to change the roll. So if you have high volumes, that's the first printer to look at. And that's one that's stationary. So stationary at key points within your environment to say at receiving is very common. PO receiving, and then at job receipt, that printer is very common. Then if you want to, you can even get more flexible and start to branch out to having mobile hip printers out there with your team on forklifts and their handheld device to print any labels that might be missing during certain transactions, and just gives you a holistic approach to applying your labels.
This question is related to hardware as well. So how do you determine what hardware, let's say mobile, handhelds, scanners, that kind of thing, is going to be best for our operators?
Another good one, another good one. And this goes to starting to identify with the conversation with your employees of what's going to fit well within their hands physically, because they're the ones responsible for carrying that device around. There's multiple different types of devices that are going to fit your environment. If you're more of a small parts environment where it's very close, intimate warehousing, something that's more of like a TC52 that is very similar to using a phone. That way I can scan them up close with the product and I'm right there. Now, as soon as you start to branch out into larger environments that have multiple bin locations and I have pallet racking, that those labels might be at a certain distance, there's devices like a Zebra MC3300 or a Zebra MC9400 that can give you long range scanning capabilities. And that way, if I can do long range scanning, I, as the operator, don't necessarily have to get off the forklift to be able to scan that product, because I can be up to, I believe it's 50 to 70 feet for those long range scanners to scan that barcode, as long as that barcode is of size that's appropriate. So it gives them flexibility in the different areas for those employees of how are they ultimately going to use it.
Okay. I think we have time for one last question here. This one's pretty high level. How do you get started in evaluating your warehouse? Really, what is the first step?
Good one. So one of my immediate suggestions for evaluating your warehouse is build a map, right? We want to be able to just build a map of my environment, of the warehouse itself. So that way I have a layout of understanding of where is my racking, where are the key parts within my warehouse that product is going to exist. Now, once you have that map, it gives you some concrete proof to start saying, what location should we start in? Where is the inventory existing? Do I need to start labeling my locations first? And really giving that clear overall visibility into, here is what's my locations look like, and in general, allowing you to start that process of asking more and more questions about it.
Okay, Garrett, it looks like that's it for our questions.
Awesome. All great questions, guys. Thank you for that. And again, just thank you for your time today. We really appreciate being here and working with Lonehill on providing solutions for the space to help you guys become more efficient within those warehousing endeavors that you might have. So if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to anybody here and communicate with Stephanie on any feedback that you might have on today's webinar. That's always greatly appreciated as well. And let us know if there's anything else that we could. Oh, I see another question. Sorry,
Yes.
Sue, that just came in.
Yep, it's in the chat. Should we label rack and box with SKU number?
So that's a great question. When you start looking at labeling, if you're labeling your rack, I recommend just putting the bin location on the rack, because that's a physical spot within the warehouse that should be always, it's not moving, right? Product is going to move from location to location throughout the environment. So when you think bin labels are static into one location, but product labels are going to be applied to the unique case or each individual item of that product. And that's going to allow you to scan it, move the product from location to location. And it really depends. Again, it comes down to your environment. Do I have very small eaches, like nuts, bolts, washers, things of that nature that exist within a little blue tote? I've seen that. And that's when it becomes applicable to label the blue tote that it exists in. So I scan the blue tote for the stock code or the SKU, and then I grab those components out. As soon as you get to the larger components, that's when you look at labeling the location to mark and identify the location, and then you start labeling the product itself so it can move going to those next steps. Awesome. No, thank you, Carla. Great question there. And again, if there's more questions that do come out of this, feel free, let us know. We're happy to always take that deeper dive into what does your environment look like specifically, and provide you with more information and context as to what you could do within your environment, and take you down that journey of what should your warehouse ultimately look like. So again, appreciate everyone's time today. And if there is further questions, feel free to contact Stephanie and the team, and we'll be able to get back to you on those next steps.